We gather today from the Apua'a Honolulu. I take this moment as your bishop to honor and give thanks for the founding patrons of our diocese, King Kamehameha IV and Queen Emma. The land on which our cathedral stands was entrusted to our church by our holy sovereigns. I acknowledge the trust they committed to our church in 1862 to care for their people, Nakanaka Uiwi, and all the children of these islands, and of our responsibility for all of creation. As the bishop of this church, invited to the islands, I deeply regret that we have not always fulfilled our responsibilities through the decades. We have often failed and turned a blind eye to those around us. For those things which we as the church and as individual Episcopalians have done, and the many things which we have left undone that contribute to the harm inflicted on the people of these islands, and now two of the Chamorro, the indigenous people of Guam and Saipan, I offer our collective lamentation as a church for our part in colonialism, imperialism, and exploitation, and I ask God's forgiveness. I ask the prayers of our blessed ancestors and of you, God's people, that we, God's Episcopal Church in Hawaii, that now include the islands of Guam and Saipan, will have the will and courage to fulfill our responsibility to all of the people of these islands, for this diocese, and for God's creation. As I come to you this annual meeting, it's my 17th as bishop. I've got to admit I'm coming this year with the sense that I'm glad the year's over. As a world, we've lived through a continuing war in Ukraine. And it's been a year since the attack on Hamas innocent civilians in Israel that has led to a destructive war on Palestinians in Gaza, and the deaths of thousands of innocent and wrecked society, and now a war that has expanded into Lebanon. As I have before, I urge you as Episcopalians to support the American Friends of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. But in fact, the Geneva Academy of International Law and Human Rights has identified 110 different armed conflicts in our world today. As the followers of Christ, at such a time, we must be the voices of peace and justice. We must stand against anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, but all of the voices of hate and division. We are one people, one ohana, one humanity. While crime rates are generally down in the United States, we are aware of school shootings, particularly on the continent. And even it seems an increase in gun violence here in Hawaii. We have lived the stress of Maui and the fires for over a year. And that came just as we were coming out of the pandemic. Though the impact on Maui has been the most acute, it's impacted all of us by insurance rates and an acknowledgement of a changing environment. There's been inflation, but particularly the high cost of housing. It's been a long year. In reality, though it's been a year like most of life, our ancestors lived through much. stuff happens. Now I'm reminded of the quote from Julian of Norwich, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of life will be well. It's taken as a simple statement of life. But it's not quite what she wrote. You see, she was complaining to God. She writes, in my folly before this time, I often wondered why. By the great foreseeing wisdom of God, the onset of sin was not prevented earlier. For then I thought, all shall be well. This impulse was much to be avoided, but nevertheless I mourned in sorrow because of it, without reason and discretion. But Jesus, who in this vision informed me of all that is needed by me, and answered with these words, it was necessary that there should be sin, but all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. These words were said, she writes, with the utmost tenderness, showing no matter of blame to me, nor to any who shall be saved. I share this because it is too easy to worry about how things are and to fall into inaction and despair. Julian pushed God and then listened to Christ. We, this Ohana, the Diocese of Hawaii, we must be in a time of reflection and preparation. We are being called to listen for the voice of Christ. Our challenge right now is to discern why we exist. Why here? Why now? What does God need from us as we prepare to sail into the future? We are preparing the canoe. There have been storms. We must mend sails and restock stores. How do we do this? We must again reflect on the basic principles of our life together. 20 years ago, this convention listened to the late Pualani Hopkins and embraced 3 Christian Hawaiian principles. With these 3 principles, and a book by Winston Halapua, the former Archbishop of Polynesia, The Waves of God and Grace, I've applied them to every day as my time as bishop. Pua taught us about the concepts when she wrote, first, is that all aspects of God's creation are imbued with mana, spiritual value, that comes from a creating God. Care must be taken to respect the mana of the land and of the sea, the plants, the animals, of the people, and most importantly, the mana of God, the source of all mana, our Creator. Our mana should not be neglected or misused. The second concept, she writes, derives from the first. As human beings created in God's image, we are responsible for respecting, protecting, and preserving God's creation and its mana, and in the language of the Church, we call that stewardship. In Hawaiian, we call it malama. Malama is a call to action, worshiping God, using God's gifts wisely, taking care of all aspects of our health, protecting the environment, and caring for and about others. These are some of the ways we malama our relationships with God and all of creation. These relationships nurture us. The God we thank and praise sustains and supports us. The body and spirit we treat properly to serve us so we can do God's work in the land and the sea. and that we can care and feed, that cares and feeds for us physically and spiritually. The person who is respected and cherishes meets his obligations to us in return. Malama is about loving and reciprocal relationships with God, God's creation, and other people. The third concept is the state we achieve when we successfully malama the mana, that is creation. This state is pono, the righteousness that is the kingdom of God realized on earth when all aspects of God's creation are in right relationship. And when we fail, we are redeemed by God's gift of His Son, and through it we can be forgiven and free again. So it is with mana, malama, and pono to guide us, grounded in the baptismal covenant as the theological and moral basis of our common life as the followers of Christ Jesus. We must come to know one another again. So I call us to a year of spiritual renewal. For that to be effective, we, the body of Christ, the church, the diocese, you and me, have to trust each other and come to know one another deeply again. This begins within our congregations, between our congregations, and among the clergy. We are called to seek the mana in our midst and to malama one another, that we might live pono as a living example of Christ in a struggling world. I hope, and as much as I can as bishop know, I insist, that every congregation engage Hawai'i pono, the work of the Reconciliation Task Force. It's to help us as Episcopalians in Hawaii to come to tell our stories, our individual stories. We live in islands with a host culture, but we are islands of many cultures. We need to hear from one another. As those of us who were here yesterday, it is based on the difference course created by the Reconciliation Leaders Network of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And it has been adapted over the last 2 years by 9 members, and it seeks to engage every Episcopalian in a healthy conversation about reconciliation that honors host cultures here and on Guam and Saipan, honors our heritage, honors our diversity, honors our stories. We are called to the ministry of reconciliation. In the baptismal covenant, we are called to seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself, and to strive for justice and peace among all people, and respect the dignity of every human being. We must commit to Hawai'i pono. And as some of you have told me, your congregations are pretty monotone. If that's the case, reach out to congregations around you. Do the conversations together. I've also asked the help of the COM and others to create an online confirmation class. Why? Well, 2 reasons. One, I do confirmations sometimes in congregations, and folk don't even know what the word Episcopal means. They haven't been prepared for the promises. But also I know that many of our congregations are small. They're mighty, but they're small. Part salaried, part-time vicars, or no clergy at all. We need one another. And this is a small example of how we can now support one another. You see, I think we need a renewed language of faith. It may be time for all Episcopalians in this diocese to renew their faith. So here's my challenge to you. I wonder if every adult member of this diocese could renew their baptismal covenant with me. If you haven't been confirmed, to get confirmed. If you haven't been received, be received. And if you haven't made a reaffirmation in the last year, when I'm with you, let's reaffirm your promises. And I'm also hopeful that in the next year, the Standing Committee will visit every island in person, as they recently have on Maui. I'm asking the Standing Committee to engage and hear your stories. You see, the Standing Committee is my counsel and advice. You remember, the Standing Committee doesn't represent any island or congregation. The members of the Standing Committee serve outside of the finances and the property management of the life of the diocese. They are the Bishop's Council of Advice. And when there is no bishop, or when there is a bishop transition, they serve an important role to guide us. I will be calling on the clergy to gather with me more often in person now that we can. We need time to renew, to build camaraderie and trust. The recent gathering of clergy in Kapolei was wonderful. We were honest with each other. We need time together. Hopefully, early in the year, it will include a focused time to look at the history and culture and future of the islands. And I hope we can include time for learning about the new islands of this diocese, Guam and Saipan. While there are many things I could mention, I want to hold up 4 ongoing ministries and concerns that are at the top of my mind. The development of the Kapolei property is ongoing. But everyone needs to be reminded that this is a diocesan project. It's more than the congregation of Haulawa'a. Feasibility studies have been completed with positive results. The possibility of partners to develop the property with other nonprofit groups and with the support of the broader church, Trinity Wall Street, the broader church is a model for the future of many of our congregations. The Kapolei Development Task Force has and is now working hard on phase 2 of the project, looking to fundraising and public relations. There is much to be done. But I am convinced that the way forward is practical, it can be accomplished, and it can be a lesson for established congregations. We are on the right track. We bought the property in 2010. It's not been easy, but there is a plan. I have confidence the Diocesan Council will continue to provide guidance to the project. But we are in the project together. As an aside, 25 years ago, I was the vicar of the church in Kapolei. I don't go out very often. For those of you on Oahu or on neighbor islands, if you have the chance, visit Kapolei. It truly has become the second city of Oahu. In 25 years, it's multiplied far beyond anything I imagined. We must continue to support and engage the environmental justice and creation care ministry of our diocese. We must be clear that the degradation of the environment, changing weather patterns, and rising waters are already a threat to life, but particularly in islands, to the quality of our life, to storms that batter islands, to water that's rising. We must continue to do more in each congregation and as individuals. In fact, the next year will be filled with educational offerings from this ministry, thanks to the Creation Care grant from the Episcopal Church. Third, our support for Maui and people of Holy Innocents must not falter. Many ask, especially those who live off-island, when Holy Innocents will be rebuilt. Frankly, I have no idea if there's even going to be a building on the land, but certainly no idea that it will be the building that was there before. Why? It is currently very unclear whether the county or state will allow rebuilding on Front Street right on the ocean. That's where the church was. But especially in the area of local O Makuhina, Hakuhinia, which includes on the border of the church property. We don't know what the future holds. As the whole diocese has responsibility for the remnant of the congregation still living on the west side of Maui, the whole of Maui is still in recovery from the impact of the fire. We have a responsibility. It may mean a complete replanting of a congregation, but it's going to take time. Finally, last year's convention decided to enter into a tripartite relationship with the Diocese of Batak, of the Iglesia Filipina Independente, and the Diocese of Northern Luzon, of the Episcopal Church in the Philippines. I still think this is important for us. Why? Immigration from the Philippines continues in Hawaii, Guam, and Saipan. We have a long and cherished shared history with the Iglesia Filipina Independente and with the Episcopal Church in the Philippines. As transitions happen here in Hawaii, I want us to build strong relationships for the good of the church. I hope we can send a team to Ilocos Norte in 2025 to build those relationships. Those are 4 things that I think are very important for us in the next year and for me. As I noted in my written report to this convention, I am deeply appreciative of the Diocesan Support Center staff and the many volunteers, leaders, and all of you who take on the ministry of this diocese. But I do want to note 4 new people among us. Justine Reggie has joined us as the controller to oversee the diocesan accounts and finances. She's there to support our volunteer diocesan treasurer, Ryan Kusumoto, and the governance groups of the diocese. Andrew Arakawa is now the canon for ministry formation with oversight of Waila Hui'ia's Center for Ministry and the Bishop's Liaison with this Commission on Ministry. He's going to help keep track of those in the ordination and the licensure process, including making recommendations to me, and assisting the Diocesan Support Center to provide clergy continuing education and offerings. Now this is the Diocese of Hawaii. He's doing this part-time, as he continues to be a chaplain at Iolani School. And while this semester, he's also the acting principal of the lower school. We do jobs. But be sure to welcome just me and to thank Andrew. Irene Maliaman had the exalted title of Archdeacon of the Episcopal Church in Micronesia. But the General Convention actually, in their resolution, said they dissolved the Episcopal Church in Micronesia. So I guess she's no longer venerable. However, the bishop does need a representative on Guam. And therefore, in the non-stipendiary role, she will represent the bishop and the interests of the diocese as she serves as the vicar of the Episcopal Church of St. John the Divine, and now as the canon to the bishop for ministry on Guam and Saipan. And finally, be sure to thank Kalani Holakai. She serves as the Community Partnership Coordinator on Maui. She is our eyes and our ears, and too often our hands and our feet, as a diocese on Maui. There are various government agencies and outreach organizations. There's that whole web of zoning and questions of what will hold the future. We needed someone who knew everyone on Maui. Fortunately, Kalani knows everyone.
He's over here in the corner hiding.
After decades of working for the Department of Health on Maui, she has seen what's under rocks. But she is now our voice on the island as a diocese. So please get to know the new members of the Diocesan Support Center in their new roles. They will help build relationships and help care for the entire diocese. In the next year, we're going to be focusing on these relationships. I hope it will be done being guided by Mana, Malama, and Pono. It's particularly important now. I said we're preparing a canoe. Why? I have made no secret of my plan to retire at the end of 2026. The Standing Committee and I have begun conversation about this, and there are all kinds of formal letters that will need to go out in early 2025. And as the details emerge, we need to talk and build relationships. I will, God willing, be with you for 2 more annual meetings before I retire. But there's going to be another convention gathering in that as well. So plan in the next 3 years for 3 meetings, next 2 years, 3 meetings of convention. 2 annual meetings and an electing convention. And the purpose of that convention will be to elect the 6th bishop of the islands. We're one team. One of the joys of being bishop of Hawaii is we do love each other. I have not gone a day when I haven't felt the love of this diocese. So we need to hear one another's stories. So I'm going to conclude this address. We're going to do a little exercise. As you're able, please stand up or gather with someone who's not able to stand. To know 4 things. How did you get your name? Where were you baptized? What is your favorite food? And what is the craziest thing you ever did for fun? 1 minute. How did you get your name? Where were you baptized? And what is your favorite food? And what is the craziest thing you ever did for fun? So you now know 3 other people and stories that you never thought you would know. So, just so you all know, I am named after 4 uncles, 2 Roberts, 1 Lee, and 1 Leroy. My mother was not creative. Make sure I get this right. I was baptized as a college student at St. Andrew's Church in Greencastle, Indiana. And I was a 19-year-old. My favorite food. Last night was my favorite food. Lao Lao, which is the craziest thing I've ever done. As a college student, Dee was in the nursing school, and so I was in another town, so I would go visit her. She was in Indianapolis, and I was in Greencastle. And I had a 1962 Chevy Impala. And one time, trying to get back to class in time on back roads in Indiana, I got that car up to over 120 miles an hour. And I scared the heck out of myself. So now that you know one another better, well, just remember, we are one diocese, one ohana, one family, one team, with respect and love. Mahalo.